economic outlook. Well, I think we got someone that knows a little bit of something of this. Last year we had Pierre Cléroux give us a lot of information and a lot to think about when it came to business. Trade agreements, our economy, the future directions business is going. He certainly gave us a lot to think about. So now we're having him back because we need to think a little bit more. And Pierre's bio is in your package there, and you can definitely tell from his background in the way of understanding the Canadian economy, government, the marketplace, and certainly with what's happening in our economy right now. It's teetering, I'm hearing a little bit, but I'm not the one to say this. But there is opportunity, and I'd like to call upon Pierre Cléroux to bring us what is the magic ball saying now? Please join me in welcoming Pierre. You're good? You're good?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here again this year. It's true that when we look back, last year was quite an amazing year. We were talking a lot about free trade, and now free trade has been signed. There's still some issues in terms of trade, but in general, the issues are much, as that we have a free trade agreement, it's much easier now. But there's a lot going on in terms of the economy. And one of the things is a lot of people are talking about the next recession. So I'm going to talk about that to see if we see a recession in the next few years. I'll keep the answer for a bit later. But also what I want to talk about is a bit further. So my presentation has 3 parts, but basically I'm going to do 2 things. First, I'm going to give you a perspective about the next 12 to 24 months. So what should we expect in terms of the economy, both for the world and for Ontario, for the next 12 to 24 months. And finally, I'm going to talk about a more long-term approach. What should we expect for the next 5 to 10 years? So I'm going to talk about 3 trends that are going to have an impact on our businesses, but more for the next 5 years or even for the next decade. So first, let's talk about the world economy. As you know, both the Canadian and the Ontario economy, they're both very open economy to the world. So that's the reason why I always start with the world economy, because what's going on around the world is really having an impact here. So first, the world economy is actually running quite well. It's quite positive. We have 3.7% growth, which is the best growth we have seen since the last recession. And the reason for that is commodity prices are increasing, which is helping countries who are producing those commodities. Countries like Brazil, Russia, but also Canada. As you know, we produce a lot of commodities, like a lot of metals. Our mining and oil industries are very important in Canada. So as a result, the world economy is improving. Actually, for the first time in more than 2 decades, there's no recession around the world. There's no country who are in recession right now. We haven't seen that for about 20 years. So this is a good news. And we believe that this growth is going to continue for the next few years. But of course, I think you will agree with me that the most important economy outside Canada for Canadians is the US economy. 75% of Canadian export are going to the US. 85% of Ontario export is going to the United States. So obviously what's going on in the US is very important for us. And the news are good. If you look at the graph, the expectation is growth is going to be close to 3% this year, which is quite amazing because for a mature economy like the US, for the size of that economy, 3% growth, it's a lot of growth. And the single most important reason for that is the tax reform. As you know, Mr. Trump has reduced taxes massively by $150 billion, and as a result is stimulating an economy that was already doing very well. The unemployment rate in the US is now 3.7%. This is actually the lowest unemployment rate for the last 50 years. So when Mr. Trump is saying that the economy is performing well he's right on this one. The economy is performing very well. Actually, the question in the US is not so much, is the economy performing well? I think everybody agrees on that. But is how long this growth is going to be sustained? A lot of people are talking about the next recession. A lot of people are saying, well, after 10 years of growth, we should have a recession. Well, actually, recession doesn't happen like that. They just don't happen because we had a long period of growth. You need a shock, or you need interest rate to increase drastically or significantly to slow down the economy. So first of all, the shock. We don't see any unbalance in the US economy. Like in 2007, there was a housing bubble that really exploded in 2007. That created the massive recession that we know. There's no housing bubble in the US economy right now. There's no regulation in the financial sector has been much more strict than before. The debt ratio of US American consumer is still very low, even after 10 years of growth. The debt ratio of businesses is still low. The debt ratio of government is increasing, but the US government is so huge that they can afford it. So there's no unbalance that we can see that is going to provoke a recession. The second part is interest rate. Yes, interest rates are increasing, and I'm going to talk about that more specifically, but they are increasing. But are they going to cause a recession? Well, this graph is helping us to understand that. On the graph right now, you see two lines. The light blue is interest rate in the US for the last 40 years, and the dark blue is inflation for the last 40 years. As you can see, we are right now in low inflation, low interest rate years. So this is a good news. Because when inflation is low, you don't have to increase interest rate to control the price. So despite the fact that growth has been going on for 10 years, inflation is still low in the US. So the Federal Reserve, the central bank, doesn't have to increase interest rate very quickly to control inflation. They will increase interest rate because the economy is running so well. But there's no pressure to go very rapidly, which should avoid us to have a recession. So we don't see a recession in the numbers. We don't believe there's going to be a recession. But there's going to be a slowdown. This is the game plan that we see. Strong growth in the US for this year and also for 2019. In 2020, the combination of two factors will slow down the economy. First, the tax reform is going to be over. So the impact on the economy is going to be gone. Second, interest rates are increasing, which is going to slow down the economy. So we believe that the US economy is going to slow down in 2020, and this is going to have an impact on the rest of the world, including, of course, Canada, because we are a very important trade partner. But so far, we don't see a recession, we see more a slowdown. So what does it mean for Ontario and for Canada? Well, we start with the Canadian economy. The Canadian economy had very solid growth last year, 3% growth. This is very high for Canada because our actually potential growth is about 2%. What is potential growth? It's like your own business. You have a potential, at the point where you refuse contract because you are out of capacity, well, an economy is exactly the same thing. For the Canadian economy, it's about 2% growth. Over that, we are over our capacity. So that's what happened last year. We're going back slowly to a more potential growth. The growth in Canada is going to be around 2% this year and 2% next year. Why is it not 3%? Well, interest rates are increasing, which is slowing down consumption and also the housing market. So that's the main reason why the growth is going to be very solid, around 2%, but that is not going to be 3% as last year. And growth is going to be in most part of the country. Actually, in every part of the country except Newfoundland, who are still in a recession. Ontario is going to have a similar growth in Canada, 2.1%. Quebec and BC are going to lead the country this year with growth around 3.4%. So let's talk a bit more about Ontario. The Ontario economy had an amazing growth over the last few years. 4 years of growth over 2.5%. That's very significant. That was one of the best growth in the country with British Columbia. But as you can see from the graph, we expect to see the growth to slow down this year. Most important reason is interest rates are increasing. So this is the case in most part of the country. Also, exports are slowing down. So let's see what's going on in the Ontario economy. By the way, 2% growth, it's full capacity. The Ontario economy just like the Canadian economy, is running right now at full capacity. So first, our export, which has been very important to create a strong economy in Ontario, they have reached a plateau. They're still very high, as you can see from the graph. The volume is high, but they have not been able to increase anymore. The reason is our export in the automotive sector has been slowing down. In the rest of the economy, Ontario export keep increasing. But as a result, the total Ontario export is actually plateauing. So this is not going to create a lot of growth in the economy. That's one of the reasons why we're going to have 2% growth and not 2.5. Business investment has been very strong, and they have been slowing down at the beginning of the year. We believe that all the uncertainty around NAFTA has created uncertainty around business investment. We believe that business investment are going to be positive at the end of the year as NAFTA, the deal has been signed, so people don't have this uncertainty around how much, what is going to be the next trade negotiation with the US. So we believe that business investment are going to keep up. Third element is government spending. As you can see from this graph, in the last 3 years, government spending has been very strong in Ontario, which has been helping the growth of the economy. That's one of the reasons why growth was so high. But we have a new government with a new philosophy. So I would be very surprised if next year government spending is increasing by 3.5%. I see more, in our forecast, we more believe that the growth is going to be around 0 because the deficit is very high, so they will have to do something about that. So that's another element explaining why growth is not going to be that high. Finally, the most important factor is interest rate. The graph that you see is the interest rate payment by consumer. So the yellow lines show you that Canadians are paying more in terms of interest rate payment than they used to. This is a huge increase over the last 2 years. As interest rates are increasing, people who have, especially people who have mortgages, they have to spend more on paying their interest rate. As a result, they don't have as much money to spend in terms of consumption. So on the graph that you see, the yellow line represents the interest rate payment, and the blue line represents the revenue growth. For the first time in 10 years, actually, interest rate payments are increasing more rapidly than revenue growth. This is the reason why in both Ontario and in Canada, the economy is not going to grow as much. As interest rates are increasing, the growth is going to be a bit lower because it's having an impact on consumption. Consumption is still increasing. The job market is still very solid, but it's not increasing as much as in the past. And the housing market is starting to slow down. It's still very elevated, but it's a bit lower than last year. Especially resales are slowing down, and prices are going to stay about at the same level, but they are not going to keep increasing. So we are starting to see the impact of higher interest rate on the economy. So the job market is still very solid. The Ontario unemployment rate is 5.6%. This is the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. So this is a sign that the Ontario economy is running at full capacity. And just like your business, when you cannot accept another contract because you're just running at full capacity, well, this is exactly where we are in terms of the economy. So it's a nice place to be, but at the same time, it's going to limit our growth in the next few years. So that's the reason why the economy is going to continue to grow at a very solid pace, around 2% for the next 2 years. Growth is going to come from business investment, still from consumption, but not at the same rate as we have seen over the last 4 years. So this is the first part of the presentation. It's about what's going to happen in the next 12 to 24 months. As we can see, we're still in the period of growth. Our economy is in a very good place. We are running at full capacity, both in Ontario and in Canada. Actually, in Canada, Quebec, Ontario, and BC, the 3 biggest provinces, are running at full capacity. They have the lowest unemployment rate ever, both like in the 3 provinces. So this is a very good place to be, and we're still going to benefit from growth for the next few years. However, when we look in the more long term, we have something to watch for. And this is the last part of my presentation. As business people, we believe that these three factors that you should watch for the next 5 years. First, I'm going to talk about interest rate, how they are going to increase. Second, about the aging population. And third, about technology. So let's talk about interest rate. As you know, both in Canada and the US, both economies are running very well. They are running at full capacity. The unemployment rate are at historic low. So there's no need to keep interest rate low to stimulate the economy. So that's the reason why we're seeing interest rate increasing in both countries. In the US, interest rates have been increasing 3 times since the beginning of the year, and we believe there's going to be another increase in December. In Canada, interest rate has been increasing 3 times as well. Now the prime rate is at 1.75. So what is going to happen now? How interest rates are going to increase? Are they going to increase? Well, in Canada, the governor of the bank have said that they are going to increase in the next few years. He wants to raise interest rate to 3% to have it like a neutral rate. What is a neutral rate? It's actually when the interest rate doesn't have an impact to stimulate the economy. So we should expect our interest rate in Canada to increase in the next 2 years to about 3%. This is going to go slowly, and this is why. The graph that you see now is the debt ratio of Canadian, and you can see it over time. We are at 169% right now of disposable income. This is, as you can see, the highest we have ever been in Canada. So this is the reason why interest rates are not going to increase quickly. The Bank of Canada, of course, they are well aware of the situation of Canadian. So interest rates are going to increase, but they are going to do slowly to make sure that Canadians have time to adjust. And that's the reason why Mr. Poulos said very clearly, Canadian has to understand that in the next few years, interest rates are going to increase. You want people to prepare for that. But nevertheless, we should expect an increase in interest rate. So we believe interest rates in the next 2 years are going to go up to 3 or 3.5%. In the US, they are going to keep increasing as well because the US economy is performing very well. So 2 things to remember as a business person. First, interest rates are increasing. It means that it's going to cost more to borrow money. Second, these interest rates are still low. You have to remember that before the last recession, the prime rate in Canada was 5%. So at 1.75, even at 3% as the prime rate, this is very low. We're still operating in a low interest rate environment in Canada. So we're still benefiting from low interest rate. But we have to keep in mind that these interest rates are increasing. So this is also have an impact on our dollar. The dollar this morning was at 76 cents. And we believe that it's going to remain low for the next few years. These 3 reasons keeping our dollar lower. First, interest rates are increasing more rapidly in the US than in Canada, putting pressure down on the Canadian dollar. Second, our dollar depends a lot on the price of oil, and the oil price is not increasing. So there's no pressure up on the Canadian dollar. And finally, the trade uncertainty. Like I said, free trade has been signed, but we are still facing tariff on aluminum, on steel, on lumber, which is creating uncertainty that keep our dollar lower. So for the next 12 to 24 months, we believe our dollar will remain low, probably between 75 and 80 cents, around what it is now. So it's a good news for our export. But of course, if you spend your holiday in Florida, well, this is not such a good news. But for business people who are exporting, this is actually a very, very good news. The second trend is the aging population. And I'm talking about it because it's going to change drastically our business environment. In the next 15 years, 24% of the population in Canada will be over 65 years old. This is twice as much as 15 years ago. So this is going to change a lot of things in Canada. Just think about the impact on our healthcare system. Our healthcare system was based or was built when we were young. when we had a young population. So in the next 15 years, when a quarter of the population is going to be over 65, well, this is going to have a huge impact, a lot of pressure on our healthcare system. I don't want to talk about it because it's too depressing, but I will talk about the impact on businesses. And the impact on businesses is the fact that our labor force or our pool of workers is not going to increase as much in the future than it did in the past. In the next 5 years, 5 million Canadians are going to retire. As a result, it's going to have a huge impact on our labor force. Our labor force used to increase, according to the graph, by more than 1% every year, and now the increase is almost flat, is almost zero. Another way to show it is our labor force in the year 2000, for example, and I could have taken like 2001 or 2003, our labor force used to increase by 263,000 people every year. And now, this year, the increase is going to be 124,000. So this is how it works. For example, in the year 2000, every year people are retiring, but at the same time, young people are graduating and joining the workforce. So in the year 2000, the difference was a positive 263,000. This year, this is still positive, but only 124,000. So if you have difficulties to recruit, this is not your fault. This is exactly the reason. And fortunately, this is not a temporary situation. This is going to be going on for the next 10 years because a lot of Canadians are going to retire. And not enough young Canadians are going to compensate by joining the workforce. Already, 39% of Canadian entrepreneurs have difficulties to recruit today. So why it's so important to talk about this? It's because this is going to be the situation for the next 10 years. So as business people, we have to think differently. We have to think differently about our human resources. If we recruit the same way than we did in the past, we are going to be in trouble. So 3 strategies for helping any entrepreneurs in Canada to recruit. First, you have to develop what we call the employee value proposition. Millennials, the newcomers in the workforce, they have different expectations. So you have to have a workplace that reflects that. They want more flexibility. They want to have an experience, not just receiving a salary. They want to work with technology. Also, we have to sell ourselves as an employer. Every business has a marketing plan to sell their product and services. But now we need a marketing plan to sell ourselves as a good workplace, as a good employer. Especially for small and mid-sized firms, unless your name is Google or Facebook, which is quite easy to attract people to work for you, you need to be more active in terms of presenting yourself as a good employer, especially on social media, which is exactly where young people are spending a lot of time. Second strategy, we have to look differently at the labor force. Our traditional way to recruit has to be different. Although the unemployment rate in Ontario is the lowest in 40 years, the unemployment rate for young people is still high. So we have to look in that direction. Unemployment rate for immigrants is still more elevated. And that's the case in every province in the country. There's a lot of good people who are coming from outside Canada who have good experience, good training, and they are very motivated to work. So we have to look differently at the labor force than we did in the past. And finally, we have to invest in technology. Technology is a great way to reduce our need for workers. And it's not only true in manufacturing, it's also true in every sector of the economy. It's true in retail, for example. So technology can really help in the situation where it's getting more and more difficult to recruit and more expensive. So the point I want you to remember is the fact that we have an aging population is changing drastically our labor force. So we have, as business people, change our mind in the way we recruit people and retain people as well. The first point I want to make is technology, and you might find it very strange that in the Economic Outlook I talk about technology. It's because at BDC we do a lot of research about how the economy is changing, and we believe that technology is the single most important factor that is going to change our business environment in the next 10 years. You hear all the time this technology, artificial intelligence, digital technology, robot, 3D printing. In every newspaper, when you watch TV, you can see that these technologies are really exploding right now. We can use this technology more and more. And this is just the beginning. Actually, I want to convince you that we are not it's not business as usual. We are in a different era right now. We are in a period of time of high change in terms of technology, of high transformation. Just like in the past, and this is not the first time. Just imagine when electricity was invented. I know nobody here remember that. But you can imagine how electricity changed the way people were doing business. Well, we are in the same time frame. We are in the same period of time. It's not electricity, but it's digital technology, it's artificial intelligence. All these technologies has the power to change our business model the same way that electricity did. When we look at the major transformation in the past, we can learn three things. First, it creates uncertainty. So if you are uncertain about which technology you should invest in, well, this is totally normal. And I can assure you that a lot of business people are uncertain about what to do. You're not the only one. This is actually the new normal. This is going to be in the next decade more and more difficult to decide which technology I should invest in my company. Second, it's transforming business model. You should really ask yourself how technology is going to change my sector. The way, for example, that buying online is transforming the retail sector. And how can I benefit from it from my business perspective? And third, what we learned from the past of this high transformation time is we have to invest more. This is no longer business as usual. We have to adopt technology. That means that we have to invest more in our businesses. So to better understand what's going on, we interviewed 2,000 entrepreneurs across the country, in every part of the country, every sector. We wanted to find two things: how they are adopting technology, and also what is the impact on their business. And the research is showing two major conclusions. The first one is not only important to invest, but there's another dimension. We have to change our culture inside the business. We have to change the way we're doing business. We have to change the way we are integrating technology to our business. Let me give you a very specific example, a true example. This is a client of BDC. They are in the retail business. They have 30 stores in Ontario and Quebec, and they're selling clothing. And they have stores in major locations. 5 years ago, they believed that technology would change their life. So they decided to invest, to sell online. And they have been very successful. 5 years later, 25% of their business is now online. But they almost went bankrupt this year. So what went wrong? Actually, it's because they didn't integrate the technology in the overall strategy. By having 25% of their sales online, the number of sales they have by store has declined. And now their cost of maintaining 30 stores is way too high. Let me reassure you, they are safe, they are okay, and they will be okay, but they almost went bankrupt because of that. The problem is when we invest in technology, we have to think about the impact on the overall strategy of our business. In that specific case, when they decided to sell online, which was a great decision, but they had to also realize that their sale inside their store will decline, and they should have adjusted to that. Easy to say now than 5 years ago, of course. But that's the point. That's a very important point. Before investing, you have to understand how the investment in technology is going to change your overall strategy of your business. So that's the first thing we learned from this study. This two dimension. There's the dimension of use of technology or investment, but there's also the dimension of how I'm going to be strategic about this. The second conclusion is it pays to invest in technology. Anyway, we look at the result of this study, the one who have invested the most, their performance is much higher. They have an increase in terms of their revenue. They also have a higher increase in terms of their profit. They have the tendency to export more and to innovate more. But the most important part is their performance is increasing. And frankly, as a researcher, I was surprised by that. I thought you need to invest today to be more competitive in the next 3 to 5 years. What this study is showing is businesses who are investing in technology today, they are performing better today. Another way to show that, that's the same study. The one who have invested the most over the last 3 years, they have seen a revenue growth much higher than others. This is the result for small business, less than 100 employees. So the one who have invested massively, they have seen the revenue growth increasing by 10% every year over the last 3 years. Same result for larger businesses, but the difference is even bigger. Look at the one who invested the least. Their revenue growth has been much lower than others. So the second result of this study is it pays to invest in technology. Based on 2,000 firms across the country, we can safely say that people who have invested the most in technology, they are performing the most. So the challenge for Canada is 19% of Canadian businesses, they are champion. They are the one who are advanced in terms of investing in technology. So as you can see, we have more companies to convince because it's going to become more and more important actually in the future. So how to do that? Well, first you have to plan. The first mistake you can make is just investing. You have to understand what you want to do and how the investment in technology is going to bring value to your clients and what is going to be the impact on your overall business. And then you invest. And you have to keep innovating after that. So in conclusion, we're still in a period of growth. And we believe that this period of growth is going to continue for the next few years. We expect to see a slowdown in 2020. But for now, we're still experiencing a period of growth. But we still have something to watch. Interest rates are increasing. The aging population is forcing us as business people to manage our HR in a different way. And finally, technology. Technology is about to change many of our sectors in the economy. So you have to realize how technology is going to change your sector, what it means for your business, and how you can take advantage of that.
Thank you. A big round of applause. Hold.